Hers was just walking away and whole meeting.
I know, I'm sorry. God have it.
No, not you, with me. She said, right? Oh, yeah. She said, if I'm just walking. I was like, oh, the notes here, Rob.
I mean, Jesse's getting him an out.
Started out and he said,
Wake up.
Trying to get Amber and Lauren back on here.
where is Jada? She coming back?
She was supposed to. I think she was, right?
Who?
Excuse me.
She's coming back. She had to run.
Lauren's in front of her computer. She should be answering soon.
Okay.
Courtney, I think you have the days mixed up. I'm not going to be there. Like, I'm not going to be there the 9th, which is the league test.
Hey, I'm gonna run in the bathroom real quick, Courtney.
Okay. Thanks for telling me.
I got
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well, she's had an hour to go to the bathroom.
Hey, Lauren.
Hey.
Hey, Lauren.
Hey.
Old sunshine over here. Oh. All right. This is the fun part that we're about to do.
Facetious? I'm sure.
Y'all are about to be in there.
Steve at River City Bass.
Yeah.
I'm looking for his last name.
A joiner.
There you
He's my neighbor.
There you go.
go. Let me tell you that. J-O-Y-N-E-R.
All right. So, I'm gonna mute you, Lauren, for just a minute. I don't know if it's Amber or you.
It's me.
Oh, okay. I hear you. So, for the first half of our session, we are going to jump right into a learning experiential so that you can experience text-based instruction from the perspective of a learner. So just review this agenda. You can read over it. So before we begin, we're going to just review a little bit. We're going to read about Robert Frost's famous poem, "The Road Not Taken." Before we begin, I want to explain why this text was chosen. First of all, it's because it's a rich, complex text that is that was over down the hall. That was worth reading and discussing. Secondly, it's because the poem is fairly well known and many people already have some background knowledge on it, or their own interpretation of it. But is there only one interpretation? So today we're going to dig in because most literary critics think not. So for instance, we've got these 3 reviews of it. They all, if you just read the title, you can tell that they all disagree with the common interpretation of "The Road Not Taken." So what we want to do today is go through a process that will likely affect your interpretation of this poem. So how does this process shift your thinking about the poet's message? Throughout the process, I'm going to ask you to keep your interpretation within the 4 corners of the page. So that means you're going to find the evidence from the poem. Don't bring in your background knowledge or, try to avoid that. Try to keep all of your thinking to the 4 corners of the page, everything that fits inside of that page. So, do what?
We're struggling with that. Yeah.
Keeping it. I'm sorry. It's hard. This was the hardest session for us because there were so many of us that didn't want to keep it within. Then she kept coming back 4 corners, but it's really hard. So in your note catcher on page 24, you'll find Robert Frost's poem, "The Road Not Taken." Read it independently and jot down in the box at the bottom what you think the gist of the poem is. So I'm going to give you about 4 minutes to read through it. I'm pretty sure you've all read it before.
With the giver. This last.
Is it? You've never read it before, Hannah?
It's the best.
You've never? Have you really never read it?
Yeah, sure.
I just,
The
I don't know.
best one ever.
You
Never.
read through it.
Where was that?
Page 24. I'm sorry. Then you might not have any background. You might be able to keep it within the four corners, right?
You never read this?
She says she's never read it. Okay. Now you can say you have.
It is.
Did y'all speak up and interpret it?
Oh, yeah.
Talk about all the different interpretations and all that.
Yeah, they had to annotate and all that. They had that DBS,
Yeah.
whatever the handout was.
Yeah.
TP pass.
Yeah, that. They didn't really care for the poem. They left it. John Lennon's Imagine. At least the
Mhm.
mom did anyway. That's because the poem was.
So after you've read it independently, if you'll just discuss with your partner or with somebody at your table what you think the gist of this poem is.
I've never read it before, though.
You have
So
it?
I'm thinking,
You never read
like,
it?
and I'm trying not to read too much.
I think it's like graduation and stuff. In other words, there's two roads. Which one are you gonna take?
Well,
The
they're
narrow
pretty
one that's
good.
less traveled, or the one that's everybody. Are you gonna be?
Yeah, I said choose this one path over
Good.
the other for different reasons. And
Going on their own
sometimes
way
you,
and set their own path.
you know,
Yes, I love it.
just going down, you know.
Right.
Don't be scared.
That's,
to-
I mean, that's
Choose one
the,
path.
that is it. You know, you're looking at two different roads.
You're
One
choosing.
most people take.
All right, so now that you've read it once independently, and thought about what the gist of the poem is, let's start digging in a little bit deeper. So for this read, we are going to focus on the literal interpretation of the text. Please listen and follow along as I read the poem aloud. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveler long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that, the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning lay equally lay, and leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how a way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh. Somewhere ages and ages hence, two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference. All right, so Cassie, thanks, guys. So, go back to stanza 1 and think about what dilemma the poet is facing in this stanza, and which words from the text reveal this dilemma.
The dilemma is choosing one path. Is he gonna choose the path then take
He
it
can't
any
travel
time?
both. That's the
Right.
dilemma.
So
Not
make sure you
traveling
stay within, yeah. So again,
within the corners.
yeah.
Mhm.
So find it and I'm just making sure that. Okay. All right. So what is the dilemma in stanza 1?
Did not travel
Working
both.
the
Make
road.
a choice.
He has to make a choice which road he's going to take. Right? There's two roads, a fork in the road. All right. Look at the second question says, what choice does the poet appear to make according to stanza 4? And cite evidence from the text that supports your thinking. All right, so which choice did he take?
He chose the path less taken.
Yeah, he took the one. He says he took the one that was less traveled by, right? So he took the road, or appears to have taken the road that was less traveled by. All right, so let's look at the words the poet uses to describe the two roads in stanzas 2 and 3. So again, focusing on the literal meaning of the text based on the author's word choice. Take a minute to look back at those stanzas and answer these three questions on the slide. So mark, annotate, underline on your text to track your thinking. So stanza 2, what does the phrase, it was grassy and wanted wear, tell us about the road? Which words does the author use to compare the two roads in stanza 2? And what does the author mean in stanza 3 when he says, and both that morning equally lay, and leaves no steps had ever trodden black? So those are your questions that you should think about. You're looking in stanzas 2 and 3.
This is just like man's shoes. You see a shoe, I see a heel, a mule, claw.
Okay. All right. So let's look at these. Let's look at these two stanzas. So in stanza 2, what does the phrase "it was grassy and wanted wear" tell us about the road the poet chose? What does the phrase "it was grassy and wanted wear" tell us about the road the poet chose?
That nobody walks on.
Nobody had walked on it, right? Okay. So which words does the author use to compare the two roads in stanza 2? What else? You just said one earlier.
Really about the same.
They're about the same. There's another phrase.
As just as fair.
As just as fair. Okay. So what do these two highlighted phrases tell us about the two roads?
They're the same.
In some kind.
The two
They're
roads.
the same.
Like twins, but
Except
not.
for the line of it.
Okay. So the two roads, they appear equally worn. Okay. It appears, or it doesn't appear, the one road is obviously more traveled by or less traveled by. He describes the other path, as just as fair, and they are essentially the same. So essentially the same, just like twins are essentially the same, but they're not. But they are, but they're not. Okay, no. So, sorry. What does the author mean in stanza 3 when he says, and both that morning equally lay, and leaves no steps had ever trodden black? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What time of year is it?
Fall.
Fall. We know
I felt
that
like
because
that if you step on leaves, they'll turn black. So I felt like that had not been stepped on very
do
much.
you think he was able to see if it was the leaves were covering the path? Would he know which one was less traveled by?
Not really.
No.
They appear the same because the leaves are covering both, right?
Right?
Okay.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. All right, so we see something isn't quite adding up here. We've already talked about that. We thought that the poet was pretty clear expressing that he took the road less traveled, but now we see that the evidence from stanzas 2 and 3 that there's really not that much of a difference, or there's no difference between the two roads. So let's dig deeper to see if we can uncover what the poet is doing and what he really intends here. So for this read, we're going to shift our focus to the fourth stanza because that's where we see this shift happen. So partner A is going to read the whole poem, and then partner B will listen and follow along. So just read and listen. That's all we're doing right now. Partner A read, partner B listen.
I feel like I'm in Star Wars.
You wrote some version of it. Sorry, I could not travel in the open travel. Long I stood and looked down as far as I could, where it bent in my hand. Then took the other, as just as fair, having perhaps a better news, because it was grasping one where.
Come on, girl.
Though as for that, the passing there had warned the ruin of the same. And both had more equally early in the region step and trodden more. Oh, I kept it first for another day. Yet knowing how waiting is on to wait, I doubt if I should ever come back.
And leaves no step
I shall be telling this with a sigh somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged to the yellow wood, and I took the one less traveled by.
And their ages and ages. Two roads diverged to wood and high. Why took the one less traveled by?
What do we realize?
Halfway at the end.
All right, so we have two questions on the board now. So what does the poet say about the two roads in stanza 4? What words does he use to convey this? And how is his statement different about the road? How is his statement about the roads here different from what he said in the previous two stanzas? So y'all discuss that with a partner.
It's like he's looking back on it.
I suddenly fear
Like because he says, I shall be telling you with a sign somewhere in ages, hence, like he's telling
Like two
us.
roads diverged with an ED, like past tense, they diverged.
I took the one less traveled by,
And
and that is made all.
and made being past tense.
Right.
Good job,
This
Look at you catching on something I haven't even talked about yet.
I actually took a poetry class in college, so, you know.
Actually, too, slipped right through. I hate that.
Yep.
He couldn't see
Hated
it.
it.
That's, I mean, I would sit there and read it once, and then, hey, what do you know about it? My answer was always like in left
I don't
field.
think it is.
Everybody else was so.
They're so deep.
This is how our stuff was. Like we had,
Oh,
they're over there like, I
So
don't think
he's,
Then he goes back and does.
This
So
is how-
where ages and ages hence
when we
is
did
where
this
you
too.
go
And I
back.
just sat there and laughed. Like,
You don't matter.
Well, I never thought about like one.
I didn't either.
I
didn't either.
Yeah,
Different.
disagree if you want.
We can.
I've read it before.
all right. So what are some,
The giver, but-
what were some of the differences? So how is it different from how is the fourth stanza different from the second and third?
I think he's projecting. I should be telling this with a sigh. Just don't stop there. Let's keep going. Somewhere ages and ages hence. It just appears to me that he realized over time, because he goes back in the third stanza and says, I doubt, you know how way leads on the way, I shall not never return. You know, I can't go back to 2000 if I wanted to, but I can look back and realize what road I took.
Okay.
And I think that he's done the same thing. It may appear the same, but over time, when he looks back, I took past tense. I took the one less traveled.
Okay. Not saying right or wrong.
Because
Because I mean, it's all an interpretation, right? Anybody else? We know
Being
Jesse
sarcastic.
disagrees. Okay. Okay. All right. So in the first three stanzas, what verb tense is the poet writing
I don't
in?
mean this wrong, I really don't. But in a situation like where he says he's being sarcastic, and I don't know if you're being sarcastic or if you're being really
no, he's
serious.
being sarcastic.
He thinks.
I shall be telling this.
But if he's serious that way, he's like really serious like that. In a situation where you have, where this is a classroom, and you have a student just like him who he's like when I asked now, I know, but he's really serious.
Yeah.
What you know, because I want him to feel like validated or something.
Yeah.
Instead of just like, well, you're wrong, or this some attitude, you know, I want, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah. Well, it's all an interpretation. So it's all how the teacher handles it. Like you're not gonna like say no, you're right, and yes, he's wrong. You know,
But
you
I
want them to
think
come to their
students-
own interpretation.
So you
Same
have to
thing.
set the norms in your classroom
Yeah.
that it's okay for you to disagree with you.
Because
It
that's
doesn't
life. You're
either
going to
one of
disagree
you.
with people and you're going to tell them that anyway.
As
Like,
long
you
as
don't
it's done
have to have the
respectfully.
same, as long as you do it respectfully and you're not like, no, you're stupid, you're wrong. You know, as long as you can do it respectfully and have those norms set. So,
Again, to what I was speaking to this morning, we're teaching these kids to be adults who can agree to disagree. That we're not always going to interpret things the same way. That's life.
The discourse should be, the discourse amongst the room, and sometimes I might do the best I can to say, you're free to express, but students immediately, they'll just, they're rude
yeah.
as juniors and seniors, and they know everything.
Yeah.
I'm just,
Can freshmen be rude to each other?
I'm just.
Oh, yes.
You know, I mean,
6th, 7th, and 8th graders can be too, right?
Oh,
All right, so in the first 3 stanzas, what verb tense is being used? Okay, how do you know? What's some evidence?
Made.
good.
Good. All right. So in the last stanza, what verb tense is the poet writing in?
Future.
Future. So there's that shift in writing from past tense in the first 3 to future tense in the last one. So,
with took being a future tense?
but
Is
it's,
that what you're saying?
let's see.
Shall is.
I know shall. I know shall is future. I shall return.
Ages and ages tense.
shall
2
return.
roads diverging to one eye.
But it's
But-
took. It's-
But he's saying, I shall be telling this with a sigh. And this is what I'm going to tell.
So, but do you see how that, I mean, I get it, but took is not future, so I'm just saying whenever I
When
shall.
but when he starts out that whole stanza, he's saying, this is what I'm going to say in the future about the past. I mean,
It's very confusing.
it is a confusing poem.
And think about
it
we're
really
adults.
is. Yeah.
We're adults being confused about.
And this is in the 7th grade
I've said this
curriculum.
for 20 years myself. I mean, so
Yeah.
I've taught it. You know.
Yeah.
So what makes the 4th stanza different from the rest of the poem? We know that we've had what? A shift in time and tense, right? A shift in perspective. Anything else? Up until now, how has he talked about the roads?
He's figuring
They're
out.
equal.
They're
They're basically the same, right? But now he says
But they were choosing, Katie, I agree.
that we're choosing.
They
Yes,
were
yes.
equal, but he chose one.
Yeah, he came
And
to
in the
that and he
last
had to
one-
choose one.
Yeah.
They're equal. They're about the same. In the last stanza, he now says what?
Well, he thinks he took the less one traveled.
Okay. He's saying that he's
Saying.
going to say this, right?
In the future, he's gonna take one less travel by?
No, in the future, he's going to tell people he took the one less traveled by. You see what I'm
That's what I
saying?
said at the beginning.
In the future,
I think the throw in the
you right, Amber?
It's almost time to throw in the towel on this argument.
In the future, he's gonna tell people, I took the one less travel by. I'm gonna tell him that in the future. But he's still saying I took the one less travel.
Maybe, maybe
I
not.
think he's saying that in the future he will be able to say that he took the one less traveled in the past.
But when he says it's made all the difference, that's past, that's not future. If I say something made the difference, I'm not
Yeah,
talking about
because
next
it
year.
made the difference, like past tense.
But he's
Himself is saying the path he took was the difference because that's what he wants to believe because that's the path he chose.
That's right.
so we're gonna skip over this because we're just gonna get we would go in and we would be reading.
Stay in the 4 corners.
We are
Yeah, we're not
supposed to,
even-
but wait just
I'm
a minute.
sorry, I apologize. I walked in late.
Yeah.
I do apologize.
So, why does the author use the phrase with a sigh?
Because he's reminiscing.
Okay,
I may be regretting.
maybe
We're
regretting.
regretting, yeah.
Okay. What does this tell us about how he anticipates retelling the story?
I mean, maybe with a sigh.
With a sigh like of relief.
Okay. Just to be, we don't really.
We don't
Jesse,
know.
go ahead. Go ahead.
He's gonna explain.
Yeah.
Say it.
Sarcastic.
Okay.
The sense of, because he goes with ages and ages, he's almost like a sarcastic. I'll be telling this with a sigh someday, ages and ages hence. That like, this is such
This is
some
actually
huge
what I wanted to come
dramatic
from.
moment in his life. In reality, it's
So based on what you know about the two roads, this is Jesse kind of went ahead. Those last two lines of the poem makes it interesting. Why did he end it that way? Many critics say it's because he was being sarcastic. When you're going and you choose two roads, like say you're getting to you make a choice in life. Do you know what would have happened if you would have taken the other road?
No,
So how can you say you took the one less traveled? How do you know? How can you say you had made the better choice?
based on what other people do.
I know.
But that might have been different
When
for
I
you.
think of this, I think about the Notebook.
Yeah.
And she had to make a choice between the two men, and she thought the harder path because she knew she'd have everything handed to her on a silver platter on the other,
Yeah.
from the other guy, that she knew that she wouldn't be wealthy on the other,
Yeah.
and that it would be more difficult for her family. I just think about
Even after her mom showed her the
Yes,
choice that
even-
she made.
that's
she
right.
did
But
the
she
opposite.
regretted it.
Right.
She told her,
regretted
I
it.
regretted
So,
it
yeah.
because I'd have rather been happy
That's a
than
good comparison.
wealthy.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Choices. Have y'all read that? Y'all watched that movie?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's not, I mean, of course, like I'm not going to say anybody's right, anybody's wrong, because it's your interpretation of the poem. But let's just move along. So how does this shift in the fourth stanza affect the overall meaning or the central message of this poem? So let's say we're in the four corners, which means we are looking at the literal meaning of the words. So kind of along Jesse's side. If we're looking at the literal meaning of those words, how does this shift in the fourth stanza affect the overall meaning of the poem? We just talked a little bit about it.
He's been sarcastic. He's thinking, oh, what the hell? I'm gonna really make this a big deal one day when I have grandchildren.
Yeah. So, okay.
I think it's the concept and what he's getting at is that the choices we make do form who we are, but the choices aren't as grandiose as we like to think they are.
Yeah.
And then we become self-delusional about how important they were looking back.
Yeah. So we stress out over these choices we have to make in life. And is it really going to be that important? Or are you going to make the best of the choice that you do make, you know?
And because it's a choice you made, is that why you can look back and say, I've never read it that way.
I never had before.
I haven't either, and I'm definitely disappointed now.
You know, this is always like
Well,
my
no,
favorite
no.
point. All right. So, right pair share on page 25 in your note catcher, you have a right pair share.
That was kind of a fun.
How did your thinking about this poem change since the first read? What did you notice about the process that we took? And how did this process support you in developing a deeper understanding of the text? So this is on page 25 of your.
He's a wacko.
Burdens of me, right?
It doesn't have to be like a big, huge paragraph or whatever. I'm gonna give you about 1 more minute. I think it's a speaker.
The sound of y'all hearing, I can hear the volume.
Oh, it's fine.
It's fine.
Just, no, just.
I had turned it up.
When we were watching the video. Yeah, we don't have any more videos, so. All right, so now let's step back and zoom out. So what we just experienced has a name, and it's called reader circles. Reader circles are essentially the framework for supporting students in moving through difficult, complex text in order to understand the meaning of the text. This is the foundation for effective text-based instruction, and it's also the foundation for the ELA guidebooks. So, reader circles, just a quick review or a quick explanation of what they are. They're a way of breaking down the steps in the reading process to support students in reading and understanding complex text. Students will engage in multiple readings of a text. There was actually one more reading that we kind of skipped over, and during each reading, you have a different lens. So the first reading, they read for the gist. The second one, we read and we focused on stanza 1. The third reading, we focused on stanzas 2 and 3. And then the last one, we focused on stanza 4. So each time looking at something different. And then it makes the thinking process explicit for students so they can transfer this process to text that they read on their own. So if they don't understand, they know to go back and reread and to look at a little bit deeper. So on this last slide, you might have seen this on some of the LearnZillion. I think there is a reader circle document, but on some of the documents they have this. But if we take it and look at each layer, it's kind of like a telescope. So each lens helps the reader to understand a little bit more about the text. So in your note catcher on page 26, you have a printed version of this. It's a little bit larger so you can see what's under each circle. And I'm going to give you about a minute just to review what comes under each one of them. If you have any questions, ask. We're going to do a deeper dive into this, though, in Module 3, so in July.
The first 3 sections, just like
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So at the heart of this framework is the move from literal to interpretations of concrete details to a more abstract understanding as you make meaning of the text. So just like we experienced with the road not taken, we started with the very literal and then we moved to more abstract thinking. So we went from making observations like, what does the phrase "it was grassy and wanted where" tell us about the road the poet chose, to how does this shift in the 4th stanza affect the overall meaning or the central message of this poem? And of course, everything else we did.
With grassy, I think there was a progression of time because the leaves are in the next thing. So grassy's like summer. Then the leaves like fall.
It depends on where you are, too.
We're not grassy years or your fall years.
Yeah. So we also address many things within the middle of that. So not just the author's craft, the word choice, and not just the meaning, the theme, but also all of these things in the middle. So this is not a linear process, meaning you do not have to go from author's craft to elements to literary to meaning. You're going to more than likely focus a lot of time in one of them, but you can go when you get to literary effects and you're going over the mood and you're going over irony and symbolism and all that, you can move backwards and go back to word choice. It's not just you can't go back. But can students understand the theme without knowing these details, this author's craft? No, right? So you're going to have to address some of these on this end first before they can understand the meaning behind the poem or the story or whatever text you're on. All right, so there are also reader circles frameworks. That was the literary text one. There are also literary nonfiction and informational text reader circles frameworks. These are all located on LearnZillion in the Start Now or Get Started section. We will be going into much more depth during Module 3 in July with reader circles. So, all right, so now on page 27, so think about the reader circles, not just about the road not taken, but think about the whole process behind it. What resonated most with you in this experiential and why?
And now I want to know, like, the other interpretations on those 3 texts that you started, like, what were their interpretations of the poem? So we've been reading it wrong all these years.
No, that's the ones that said that was theirs, yeah.
Okay.
Because most people think it's like, oh, I took the one that was less traveled. And,
Gotcha.
yeah.
Because I was curious, because there was like 3 different.
Yeah.
Even though Jesse is a complete wacko, I will say that.
I mean, it makes sense what he said.
Because it seemed too obvious.
Yeah.
Stay at the, if it were that easy, why would we study it? Why would it be a significant piece of literature?
Right.
Exactly. That's why it's a complex. Because if you were to just read it and be like, oh, this isn't hard, it's not a complex. If you just read it and look at what.
When I first read that poem, I was a sophomore. And something struck me wrong. I always heard that that's how my teacher taught interpretation. And it bothered me so much, I actually stole a book of Robert Frost poems from the school library. Which I still have.
You still have.
And I read it almost daily for a while because just something didn't sit right. And that last stanza was it. And it took me a long time to figure out why it didn't sit right. But there was just something that transitioned that was so different from the rest.
Yeah. So on page 27, you have these 2 questions. How would you describe a reader circle to a colleague? Is the second one. If you'll just take a few minutes, about 3 to 4 minutes to write that down. Hey, we're ahead of schedule. We are 17 minutes ahead of schedule.
I can't believe it.
Well, because I kind of like moved on that because we could have stayed all day on the road not taken, but no, there's nothing to be sorry about. One more. This is a fun one too. All right, so we're going to move on to our last session for Module 1. So once we finish this, we can head on home. So in this session, we are going to be talking about text-based versus strategies-based instruction. So on page 29 in your note catcher, you have these do now questions. Reflect on your journey through the reader circles with the road not taken. Based on this experience, how would you define text-based instruction? And then reflect on your experience teaching ELA guidebooks if you have taught it before. And in what ways do you see this evidence of text-based approach in the ELA guidebooks? So I'm just going to give you just a few minutes to write down the short answer for those.
So the road not taken, what paired text is it?
The giver.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, that does. I mean, it really does once you think about it. She's got a blanket around her, basically. Big old sweater. All right, so here are our objectives for this last session for the day. Our main goal is to distinguish between text-based strategies and text-based and strategies-based instruction, and to leave with a clear understanding of the guidebooks approach and the rationale research behind it. So this is our agenda. We're going to, most of our time will be learning about text-based instruction and exploring where strategies and standards intersect with it. And then we're going to reflect on all of our learning from today. All right, so I want to anchor our learning in the instructional shifts that we talked about earlier, specifically shift number 2, evidence. So we had a chance to see some of the examples in the ELA guidebook lesson back in the session 1 from this morning, but we're going to go a little bit deeper into the why behind it, or behind the shift. So why is evidence-based instruction at the heart of the guidebooks, and why is it important to literacy instruction?
So we're ready for college and then beyond, career.
Exactly. We talked about. So let's start back with some research. How does focusing on evidence from text affect classroom conversations and student learning? So in 2009, 3 researchers set out to answer this question. So to answer it, they compared 2 classrooms with each use different types of approaches to literacy instruction. In the first classroom, they observed the teacher use a strategies-based approach, and in the second classroom, they used a text-based approach. So in a moment, we're going to read through this research or read through their conversations and then be able to compare them. So before we get to the transcripts, let's read the text that both classrooms use. I've got it up here. It's not in your note catcher. Lauren and Amber, it's on Google Classroom. I just added it before when we got back from lunch. So the text used in the 2 classrooms was The Fun They Had, and it's a science fiction text written in 1951 by Isaac Asimov. No idea how to pronounce that. So if you'll just, can you pass these back. So this story is just short. It's a few paragraphs long. So on the front, if you'll read this independently to yourself. All right, so discuss with the partner. What's the gist of this excerpt, and how would you know, or how do you know? I mean, it's kind of funny though because it was written in
I
1951.
got to check in the dates and I was like, wow.
Yeah, it's just not on the television.
Yeah.
So it's written in the future, or it's written, in future tense or whatever.
Like based on future.
So what happened?
There's no more books, like paper.
There's no more like paper books. They thought it was amazing that they found this paper book, but what did they think they were supposed to do with it?
Read it right away.
Throw it away. Blows my mind. All right, so they compared those yellow crinkly pages to words standing still instead of moving across the screens, right?
Mm-hmm.
So let's get started by role playing the classroom that took the strategies approach. So on page 2, you have a script from this classroom or of this conversation 1 strategies approach. So if you will each choose a part at your table, and somebody might have to be more than one part, it doesn't matter. But if you'll each choose a part and read the script to see, or just read the script right now, and then we're going to discuss it. She said you're where it says student.
Students, because he only has to say no one time. Like he has one line.
I can handle that.
See, I figured you can appreciate that.
Students.
Yeah.
So number 5 where it says students, not
Cindy, you
students.
can be the teacher.
Just students, yeah.
Cassie can be Holly.
You all sound like a bunch of students right now.
Student can be.
Well, you know.
I'll do it.
I'll be Kyle.
All right.
Oh, good. Stop there, honey. This is a good place to stop and check on understandings. What might be confusing here, Holly?
The page headed May 17th, 2157.
Oh. Seven might be confusing to a person reading this. And what would you do to help yourself understand 2001-57?
Ask a question.
Maybe you could like tell if it's a date or what, just like if it's a date, you could see how many years from now it is.
You made an inference. In the future, good. You made an inference. Did the author say this is taking place in the future? Did the author state that?
No.
You're welcome. But yet, we knew it, didn't you, Kyle?
Yeah.
Based on what you read, and then you even did some work in your mind, trying to figure out how far into the future it was, so that was good. Is anyone in the room confused about anything we read here? What did you think about the business with the books having print?
I was confused about moving on the television screen. Yeah, that one. The part when it said they turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly, and it was awfully funny to read the words that stood still instead of moving the way they did, that they were supposed to on a screen.
That was confusing to you, huh? What did you do to clear up your confusion?
Ask a question, read on, reread.
You could do. Which one would you pick?
Ask a question.
Yeah. What would you be asking yourself?
What the heck are they talking about?
So what?
Wait, that's the second one.
Sorry.
All right, so in the strategies-based classroom, who is doing most of the talking?
The teacher.
The student.
Okay, let's say that. So there's some students doing talking, but I would say the teacher. I guess the teacher's doing more of the thinking.
You're right.
Yeah. So who is doing most of the thinking? We just said teacher. But what is being talked about?
Strategies.
Okay, what types of strategies are being talked about? Making inferences, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. What is not being talked about?
Meaning,
The meaning of the text, the core meaning of the actual text. All right, so read conversation 2, text-based approach. You're going to assign roles at your table. There are only 4 roles for this one.
Get out of that.
Thanks.
Okay.
Cassie's the teacher.
I'll be
Catherine.
I'm
I'm a student.
Okay. No. Okay. I'll be whoever this is. I don't know.
Tajay.
So what's this all about? What's going on here? What's going on? Tajay, what's going on?
Tommy found a book and they're looking in it and they're saying that pages are crinkly and stuff and they're thinking that if you read the book, you can go back in and it will be totally different about it, but it's all still the same. And they say that after you read it, you might as well throw it away because because if you read it and you know what it's about, if TV one calls, if you turn on the TV, then you watch something the next day, it won't be on the same page.
yeah, all that agrees with that. Catherine,
Yeah, all that's very true.
Catherine.
It's in the future, it says it's 2,157, so it's, the book is really old now because now, like, in the future, it says that they don't read books, but they don't read books. They read like on television screens, and they're shocked because the book is really old and stuff.
Yeah, and I'm
Teacher
sure
thinking this, I cannot, this is what my
Yeah.
it's too much going on. The words stress me out. Yeah, and you added, what Tajay already said, yeah, the set in the future, in the bulletin screen, are two totally different things. The words don't, move around when they're like, the way, they think they were supposed to.
All right.
Now,
So who is doing most of the thinking in this approach?
students.
The students, right?
Yes.
They're not doing a real good job.
No,
No,
but
like,
think
they're
this
not-
was also
they're not
like
doing,
way back
Oh.
but they're talking about specific evidence, right? They're giving evidence to make meaning of what they're reading. And focuses on the understanding of the text versus applying and practicing strategies. All right. So this is I'm gonna say like the whole time. So based on this experience, let's summarize what we mean by strategies-based versus text-based approach. So strategies-based are procedures, mark it, Cassie, to guide access to the text. Students might make predictions, ask questions, and make connections, etc. So text-based approach is asking open meaning-based questions, focusing on evidence from the text. The transcript from class 2 might not represent an exemplary example or lesson. It's not, okay? But the point was to clearly see the difference between the two. Yeah. They're thinking. It's the student. The teacher wasn't continuing to ask questions. She just said Catherine, and Catherine spoke. And then she, so it wasn't, the teacher was more of a facilitator in that classroom. So the difference is pretty clear. What did the researchers ultimately find when it came to text-based, approach? Researchers found that students' discussion was more text-focused, 97% versus 66%. Students remembered significantly more information from the text, and the length of the student response was nearly triple. So what does this say about strategies-based approach? Researchers found that students taught with the strategies-based approach were no more successful in using comprehension strategies. So, you think about how many years we focused on, okay, this is making an inference, and we teach making an inference for a week, and, we apply it throughout the year, but they still are no more successful when we do it that way. So the reason for this result is that strategies and skills grow out of content and comprehension, not the other way around. So you have the content, you teach them comprehension, they're going to learn those strategies and skills and be able to apply them. Strategies are abstract and disconnected from meaning and content, which is kind of understandable of why instruction with them does not stick. So we're going to we're not taking a break. So let's just stop with that for a minute and let's talk about reading strategies. And we know how they've been all the rage throughout the past few decades. So does the research mean that we shouldn't use reading strategies anymore?
No.
Of course not. But what it means is that a little strategies instruction can be helpful, particularly if students haven't learned them before. But a lot of strategy instruction is no more helpful than a little, and it wastes valuable instructional time. So when strategies are taught, they should be used in service of making meaning of the text. All right, so in your note catcher on page 30, we're going to just drill down a little bit more because this is an important distinction for us to make. If we know that a little bit of the strategy instruction can be helpful, let's take a look at 2 examples and see which one is most helpful in supporting students in developing a deeper understanding of complex text. So on page 30, there are some question sets in your note catcher. So you have 2 questions from Flowers for Algernon unit. So what I want you to do is write down what you notice about these 2 questions and how is the strategy of inferencing addressed differently in these 2 questions.
Not directed. She's going to the beach. Do you want me to pull a picture? So look at question 1. Question 1 said, as I was reading Flowers for Algernon, I made an inference about how Charlie was feeling. Now go to your independent reading books and make an inference about a character in a book you are reading. Question 2, as I was reading Flowers for Algernon, I made an inference about how Charlie was feeling. What else could we infer about Charlie based on his interaction with the doctor? So, what do you notice about those 2 questions? What's different about them?
What's
different about those 2 questions?
It's a lot.
The first one is very independent with little to no direction. And it doesn't even have to be text-based.
Well, exactly. And so the teacher, if they're going to their independent reading and they're making an inference, are you going to really know if that's correct or if it's like a valid inference? Probably not unless you read the book, you know.
Supporting evidence, they didn't say to do.
Yeah, it didn't say support with evidence or anything.
It's taking you away from that text that you are teaching.
Yes.
And this is the way I taught.
Mm-hmm. Oh, me
This
too.
is the way I taught.
So, what about in question 2? What are they doing? What are they asking?
Why don't you go deeper?
So we've made an inference. So now let's make another inference, right? Based on his interaction with the doctor. So it gives him explicit direction. Let's think about his interaction. Let's make an inference, right? So to summarize what we mean by a text-based approach, it's important to point out that this approach always begins with a text that is worth reading, so a complex text. Secondly, instruction should be designed to support students in making meaning of this text, which can be accomplished effectively through text-based instruction, text-based questions and tasks. So let's pause to think about why this makes sense. Why does this approach make sense? So think about your own motivations as a reader. When was the last time you picked up a book and decided you're going to read it and you are going to practice making predictions or making an inference, right? From beginning to end. Do you do that? No. You pick up a book for enjoyment, right? Or to get that light bulb moment or to like dig into it. I'm the nerd that I do think about like I do make predictions all throughout whenever I'm reading, but I don't pick up a book just to make predictions, right? We read to get those light bulb moments just like we had, or some of us had in The Road Not Taken, you know. But as teachers, we should strive to get our students to that point too. We want them to read for enjoyment and to get those light bulb moments when they're reading. So we don't want to always show them that reading is only to like practice for fluent or practice for all of these things, practice for making inferences and practice summarizing. We want to show them that reading can be fun and foster a love for reading. But on the flip side of that, you do need to focus some on strategies for the sake, just for, but it has to be within the actual text, just like we saw in that second question. I'm just trying to make sure, I'm trying to summarize this. So, but without those light bulb moments, it's easy for a student to hate reading, right? They're going to learn to hate it.
Going through the motions.
Yeah.
It's just to get through
Exactly.
skills or strategies.
So, think about why does it make sense? Look at that, text-dependent questions. Where do we see those? Right? We're going to also have text-dependent questions that they're going to see later, right? So if we're doing strategies-based, and we're not doing any text-based instruction, then they're not going to do well at the end of the year on the LEAP, on the ACT, on any of those things. They're not going to do as well, right? Of course, you're going to have some that will, no matter what, but
My kids. No, I'm just thinking it was a joke.
So what are the implications of text-based instruction on the kind of questions and tasks we give to students? This shift requires us to be very intentional about both questions we ask and the responses that we accept from students. So take a moment to look at this example and non-example. So the example says, what claim does each character make about Charlie and whether he should or should not be used for the operation? Cite evidence from the text to support your thinking. Our non-example, in your opinion, should doctors and scientists be allowed to conduct experimental surgeries on people? What about on animals? Why or why not? So what do you notice about these two questions?
The first one is specific.
One wants text-based evidence and one straight up just opinions.
Exactly. One's text-based. It's specific, like Hannah said. But the other, the non-example, is your opinion. So that's like the old way that we used to do, the old writing. I was guilty of asking, in your opinion, what do you think about this? All the time. But, now that you see this, which one requires a higher level of thinking? It's that first one, right? But text-based, right? All right. So before we move on a little bit more into the actual guidebook stuff, or a little bit more of the guidebooks, let's just reflect. So what has resonated most with you? How does this learning connect to what you've already been doing in your classroom? And what might you do differently as a result of this learning? You will find these questions on page 31 of your note catcher. So all right, so let's come back together now and think about where and how the standards come into play when thinking about text-based instruction. So does text-based instruction mean a move away from standards-based instruction? No. The standards are our guide. So the two most important things that drive our planning in a text-based instruction are the text and the standards. This is a shift in how we traditionally think about standards-based instruction in ELA, because instead of which standard will I teach this week, we are now asking which standards are necessary to deeply understand this text. The good thing about guidebooks is, though, it's been done for you. So if you're teaching those lessons as they're written, then you're meeting every standard. You don't have to worry about it. They're done. And if you're teaching more than one unit, you're teaching them throughout the whole year, because every standard is met in every unit. So, all right. So I'm going to ask you to turn to page 31 in your note catcher. There's an 8th grade standard. I want you to review that 8th grade standard that's on page 31 and read the sample question. And look and see how do you see the alignment between the standard and the question. So it's important to emphasize that this is a text first question, meaning the point of this question is to support students in making meaning of the text, beginning with understanding the character Charlie Gordon by analyzing evidence from the text. You can work with a partner if you want to. Yeah. What's something similar in both the standard and the question?
Reveal aspects.
Yeah. So in the standard, it says reveal aspects of a character, but in the question, it says identify 2 to 3 quotations which reveal aspects of Charlie's character. Mm-hmm. So these students need to know even the language of the standards, mm-hmm. because that language from the standards is going to be seen on the assessment at the end of the year. What else? What else does the standard call for that you see in that question? you see evidence of. Look at the beginning of the standard. And see if it has anywhere in there that you have to find that. Look at the very beginning of the standard. Is there evidence where it says analyze how particular lines of dialogue or incidents? You see evidence of that where they have to give 2 to 3 quotations, right? That that reveal is, so they're given those quotations.
And they'll prove their analysis through their explanation.
Exactly. So, what exactly is the shift here? The shift is moving from non-text-based approach, which looks like starting with the standard and picking text to support the standard or to teach that standard. So, for instance, starting, we have Unit 1, we're going to teach main idea. Unit 2, we're going to teach characterization, text structure, author's point of view, theme. So in each unit, they read a variety of texts and they only work on those things. They are practicing those standards and those skills. So that was moving from that to now a text-based approach. So instead of starting with a single standard, we start with a rich, complex text and then ask what standards beg to be taught through this text, which standards can be used in service of understanding the deeper meaning of the text. And what you'll notice is that multiple standards, if not all of the grade level standards, can be leveraged through a single text when the goal is deeper comprehension. So just like whenever we went through and looked at the Robert Frost poem, good readers move through multiple layers with the reading circle when reading for deep, authentic reasons and understanding. So, capture your learning. So what I want you to do is on page 32 of your note catcher, you have three words: strategy, standards, and text. So create a sentence beginning with each of these words. Think about what we went over with this last section. So funny how some of the stuff is like this, and then like our mentors training and stuff, like it all just kind of goes together. You went with us? Yeah. Well, one of the things that we did.
We already did. It's just now, I'm really gonna get a hard time.
So one of the activities we did in mentor training, we actually did in content leader, the exact same thing. So, yeah. So I'm gonna move along. It's okay if you didn't finish. So we've learned a lot in this module 1. And it's important to set aside some time to digest what you learned today. So there's these directions on the board. Record your biggest takeaway from each session. And then what question do you have based on module 1 content? There are 6 boxes at the bottom of page 32 that you can record your biggest takeaway. And it actually has the names of each of the lessons. You can go back and look through, all of that. I'll give you some independent time for that. And then before you leave though, or do we need to wait till we can do it tomorrow, right?
Yeah.
Do we only have to do one of the evaluations, or do we have to do one for each day?
No.
I don't know what Miss Wiley will want.
Right. I'm trying to think too.
We could always put days that are,
You know what? Humor me, and y'all go ahead and do an evaluation today, so that we have both of those. Plus, we'd like to get your feedback before tomorrow. So
exactly. I didn't think about that.
We need to address any questions that you have. We can address those. Does that make sense? Courtney?
Yeah.
The purpose of the evaluation is to improve our practice.
Exactly.
Plus, we'll need
And
expectations.
Hannah, we're getting out early.
What you think?
Well, I mean, I'm getting out early. You can say no. Hey, so once y'all are finished, just email me your note catcher if you can. Thank you. I'm gonna stop it now. Talk to y'all tomorrow.
Okay.